The following episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor is adapted from The Wayward Wives by Will Doyle. It is the second part, and where we left off, Jynx had mysteriously begun choking during the party's visit to the Hearthstone. Massul has carried the stricken halfling off, leaving Túrendil to find out what happened. Túrendil takes a step towards the bar. "You seem to have women in the building, Pasco." His hand casually resting on Nephilium's hilt makes his meaning clear. "What happened to them?" "I can't be held responsible if you outsiders won't read what's posted." Bar patrons begin to stand up and make for the door, unsure what just happened and wanting no part of a confrontation. Pasco asserts there's a reason women aren't allowed in the tavern, to which the warpriest demands to know what that reason is. As their voices raise, one of Ned's daughters pleads with the elf to leave her father alone. Knowing that bloodshed here won't get answers, Túrendil threatens Pasco with the consequences of breaking the Daelin's compact before turning to leave. Outside, he finds Jynx just beginning to sit up under the ministrations of Massul and Rilyanasse. "I don't know what he did, but he definitely did it," he growled. As Massul and Ril try to talk Jynx out of trying to sneak in the back way, one of the barmaids comes out to them and asks if they'd be willing to meet privately with her family away from the townsfolk to talk about what happened, offering the upstairs rooms or behind the tavern. Massul flatly refuses to approach the building again, but Rilyanasse firmly says she's willing to hear them out. The maid is firm that the meeting will have to be less than 5 minutes, but does not explain herself. The adventurers agree and pay for their drinks, and soon enough Ned Pasco and his other two daughters emerge, the tavern having mostly cleared out after the strange incident. Ned indicates Jynx and Rilyanasse. "Before we begin, I want you to know if you can't breathe, you need to get away from me." Once they indicate their understanding, he continues. "My apologies. Please don't threaten me in my home." "Please don't throttle my companions," Túrendil answers acidly. He continues, introducing his daughters, Fliss, Mona, and Cora. Turning to the warpriest, he asserts he did nothing intentionally and suffers from a curse as a consequence of his own actions. "Elaborate," the elf answers coldly. He clears his throat. 2 years ago, I stole from a shrine to buy gifts for some of my lovers. The goddess of the shrine cursed me so that any woman not of my own flesh and blood would choke in my presence. The curse of a philanderer. I moved to the wilds to try to find a cure for my curse. It's the only way I can make a living and keep other people safe." Massul asks,
"What was this shrine you speak of?"
"I didn't know at the time, but it was the goddess of bad luck." "Well, that was a bad mistake," Túrendil remarks dryly, knowing well Bishaba's bent for petty vengeance. "Are you a priest?" asked the barkeep. "I am," the warpriest replied. He explains that he's saved over the years since his wife's death and has managed to buy a scroll to break his curse, saying that must be used tonight during the full moon to be at full potency. He offers that if Túrendil will use the scroll to break his curse, he'll close the tavern and move back to the city with his family. The warpriest promises to try, but warns him he does not have until midnight, as the women of the town will come to burn the tavern this very night. The party says they will do their best to call them off, but can't guarantee they'll listen. Pasco says that at least by that time the men will be gone, having played their game and been off, and it'll just be him and his daughters when the mob comes. Massul asks,
I've been meaning to ask, what is this game that they're playing?
The barkeep elaborates that it's called fish hooks. The men put their lures in the bucket, and the man who was lucky the night before draws one. He says there's some strumpet in the woods they all go off and take turns, and if their wives think any of them are having a turn with his daughters, they're in for a rude surprise. "Oh, well," Túrendil says, at a loss for words as one of Pasco's daughters makes a gagging face. Aside in Elven, Rilyanasse suggests that maybe meddling in a divine curse over a shrine theft may not be the best idea, but Túrendil is confident that Tamora will counter her sister. But with that, their time is up, as Ril and Jynx find themselves gasping for air. They put distance between themselves and Ned Pasco, as Túrendil promises they will return. Stopping off at the woodsman's hut to find his daughter well, if pale, the four take her with them and hurry back into Wayward to meet with old Salma and tell her everything. The herbalist offers to take them to the fishwives and supposes that telling them an arrangement has been reached will be enough to keep them from burning the tavern. Looking over Zora, she remarks that the girl is the very picture of the late lord as she goes over her symptoms. Túrendil tells Salma about the game the men were playing at the Hearthstone, and the old woman goes pale, saying that's almost certainly the hag that the witch hunters had missed 15 years before. The four discuss the goings-on at the tavern and lament leaving before determining who won at fishhooks. As it was near, and another piece of their puzzle to be placed, the group makes ready to investigate the old burnt-out manor. The black skeleton of the building juts into the sky, choked by thorny vines. Hundreds of crows watch the four approach, cawing noisily from their roosts. A snarling and gnawing can be heard from the coach house, and it is not difficult to spot out several massive two-headed hounds covered in maggots. Combat quickly breaks out as the party draw their weapons in advance, the monstrous canines meeting them in battle. The fight moves along quickly, the party dispatching the beasts while only taking a couple of bites in return. A letter to the Lord born of candles from a woodsman named Jago found in searching the gore in the coach house reveals Zora, the woodsman's daughter, as an orphan he'd taken in as a baby. They render first aid to the wounded and move into the manor in search of more clues. Expecting more danger, instead the four find a carving obscured by moss, mostly unharmed by the fire. Clearing away the growth, the piece shows the Lord, his wife and daughter, and their servants before the manor. The keen eyes of our heroes note oddities in the relief sculpting. A boy chasing a two-headed hare, dead fish floating in the river, and a woman breastfeeding a goat. Túrendil comments that the mural must have been constructed shortly before the manor burned, or some curse has manifested itself in it. The room to the west yields nothing else, and the flooded library to the east seems an empty room of fly-filled rot, save for Massul discovering a secret passage down. There, a preserved tome among other undamaged belongings reveals the sordid truth of the late lord's affair and obsession with a beautiful and willing peddler girl, Liachami, even going so far as to bring his child to meet her. The journal goes on to tell of his discovering her true nature, that of a hag. The journal recounts his horror upon returning for his forgotten drinking horn to see the horror of his daughter being devoured by the monster, only to awaken the next day with a whole and hale babe in her crib. The last entry details the final thoughts of a desperate man overcome with grief and madness, setting torch to himself, his estate, and all within it. The dice are not kind in revealing the secrets of hags and changelings, and without any further knowledge on the subject, the four return to old Salma to tell her the news, careful of letting the girl know of her true parentage. The herbalist says that being it is Zora's 13th birthday, unless the curse upon her is broken, the girl will be no more and become a hag this very night. After a short discussion, the four conclude that they might bargain with Ned Pasco for his scroll of remove curse and use it to save the girl, then slay the hag, thus breaking her hold on the menfolk of Wayward, return them to the fishwives, and thereby saving the Hearthstone from being torched by an angry mob of cuckolded women, or worse for the fishwives, should Ned and his family fight to defend their homestead. With no time to lose, the party hustles down the path to the Hearthstone and calls Ned Pasco outside to ask him for his scroll. Rilyanasse hastily explains the situation, that Zora will die this very night if not freed from her curse. Seeing doubt on the man's face, Túrendil adds that he will personally buy another scroll and return to break Ned's curse as soon as may be. Pasco insists on sealing the bargain with a blood handshake, slashing his palm and offering it to the elf, who accepts, thanking him for his kind deed. Making haste back to old Salma's cottage, Túrendil goes directly to the room where Zora lies sleeping and wastes no time in reading the scroll over her. The girl does not wake, but immediately seems healthier and calmer. Massul, eager to find out who among the fishermen did not return, insists on going to check on Ewella Ross. The adventurers arrive at her cabin only to find her crying alone, with no sign of her husband or her child. Alarmed, Rilyanasse asks what happened, to which the woman sobs, "He came and took Ezra, right out of me arms!" Already suspecting the answer, Túrendil asks who took her. She responds that Jory did, and it was as though he wasn't himself. Rilyanasse quickly asks which way he went, and Ewella points off towards the woods. The elves don't take long to find the man's tracks in the damp ground, and swiftly follow the trail a good distance to a clearing in the forest. A crackling fire illuminates the scene of a covered wagon sitting in the clearing, and oddly, scores of tiny, wrapped presents hanging in nearby branches. A raven-haired woman emerges from the wagon as the heroes approach. "Welcome," she purrs. "What are your desires?" Massul bluntly responds, "Not you," while Túrendil wastes no time with her game and demands to know the whereabouts of Jory and the child Ezra. She pouts a bit before smiling wryly. "Why, sleeping peacefully, of course. I presume you've come for your heart's desire as well. I can trade it with you. Warpriest and Berserker both deny that she could give them any such thing, and Túrendil repeats his question regarding the child. She responds saying she told him already, sleeping peacefully.
Where?
Rill demands, fingers running over the fletching of an arrow in her quiver. Why, in my caravan, of course, she says, smiling sweetly. Through wasting time, Túrendil blesses his shield and steps forward, asking if he might have the pleasure of her name, but rather than respond, her voice turns ugly as she hisses, You'll never leave here alive tonight, meddlers! Her skin sheds in an instant, revealing a green-skinned crone as her wagon rumbles to life. She speaks Túrendil's name as she points at him, which concerns him as he never told it to her, and a torrent of swamp water issues from her mouth while beetles scuttle through her hair. The gifts hanging from the tree burst open and rotten body parts begin to swirl around the clearing. The wagon rumbles to life as the hag screams to, Get them! Then casts a spell and vanishes from sight. Jynx melts away into the underbrush surrounding the clearing as Túrendil and Massul raise their weapons and look for any sign of the monster. Massul fans out as Túrendil blesses his sword and strides forward, demanding she show herself. Rilyanasse wards herself against evil. A swarm of crawling claws engulfs Túrendil and Massul, dragging them to the ground. The voice of the hag echoes through the clearing. Of course, dearie! Let me make things a little brighter for you! The fire flares up suddenly, becoming blindingly bright as she appears over the warpriest's fallen form, cackling madly. The wagon surges forward, running down Túrendil while Massul manages to roll out of the way. Surging to his feet, the Berserker brings his hammer down on the wagon, which cracks at the blow. Túrendil calls on Corellan's protection, but cannot break free of the grasping hands. He deflects the hag's claw with his shield and taunts her with the breaking of Zora's curse. Massul continues to hammer on the wagon as it drives away from him to run down Rilyanasse. Jynx boards the wagon, intent on finding a way inside, but the wagon tongue lashes out and hits them. They gamely clamber aboard anyway, only to find the door stuck tight. Túrendil finally breaks free of the crawling claws. Massul, Túrendil, and the hag continue to trade blows as the wagon throws Jynx clear and tries to run them down, which they handily avoid. Maneuvering to flank the hag, Massul and Túrendil both lash out with their weapons, striking her almost in unison, followed by a flaming arrow from Rill's bow. Twisting out Túrendil's reach, she ducks under Massul's hammer and touches him, cackling. The dwarf feels his strength draining away as Jynx comes charging to her friend's aid. Stepping back to regain his reach, the elf and dwarf continue to strike at their antagonist. The wagon tries to run them down again, but Massul's quick reflexes with his hammer smash a wheel from it, and it crashes to a halt short of Túrendil. The hag, distracted with the larger combatants and directing her wagon, Jynx manages to plant a dagger in her back, and she shrieks in pain. Massul brings his hammer directly down on her head, and the monster falls motionless. Túrendil rushes straight for the ruined wagon as the hag's body hits the ground, wrenching the door open. To his relief, he finds the child, Ezra Ross, apparently hale and hearty. They were in time, and the hag had yet to feast. Her father, Jory, was not so lucky, and his corpse lay in the bottom of the wagon. A search of the hag's corpse reveals some disturbing finds. A crude drawing of a halfling child and a pony that Jynx recognizes as their own work from their childhood. A music box that plays a lullaby in what sounds exactly like Rilynasse's father's voice, but pained. A brooch bearing the symbol of Clan Bloodfury that Massul could swear is authentic, and a ring bearing the symbol of Sihanin Moonbow that Túrendil recognizes as one his mother, Therisdesis, had lost when he was a boy. Shaking off momentary befuddlement, the warpriest blesses Nephilium and promptly drives the blade, glowing with holy power, through the hag's heart to be sure. Her corpse dissolves into a puddle of filthy swamp water. The party returns to Wayward with the child, and come morning takes care of their business in the town, but on the long walk home they cannot help but ruminate on what it could mean that this creature had their lost belongings. This concludes The Wayward Wives, part of the Crusade for Myth Drannor, but the campaign is far from over. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you for the next adventure.